Welcome back. I thought about actually making this video as a continuation to the previous one, but I wasn't sure if I was going to record it like literally in the morning after the first video. Um, I just wanted to sort of continue the topic, and I would say that the whole purpose of this channel wouldn't be about just giving advice on what you should do and what you shouldn't, because I don't feel like I'm really in the position of giving anyone advice. I could just only share my story and share what helped me, and maybe it will help any one of you, and I'll be happy for that. And yes, I realize I probably look much worse than I did last night, but honestly, I don't care enough because there is virtually nothing I can do right now to instantly improve my condition. But hey, so the thing I wanted to discuss with you today would be sort of still continuing the topic of reinstating the habits. And in my case, one of the easiest habits to actually instate, because it does not require money or anything, it only requires some patience, most of all with yourself, and some time. In my case, it's sleep. I'm not the one to tell you that sleep is super important. It is. It is actually much more important than a lot of you might actually realize. When your sleep cycle is disrupted, it affects you in more ways than you think. So it's not just about the sleep deprivation. It's not just about when you go to bed, you wake up, you're still tired, you didn't have enough sleep. And sometimes, even if you have enough hours of sleep, whether it's like 7 or 9, whoever runs on whatever number of hours, you may still feel extremely tired, and even coffee or energy drink doesn't seem to help much, if at all. Sometimes even this happens. Sleep also affects the brain, and in case with girls and women, it also largely affects the hormones. Apart all of my conditions, I mean medical conditions, both confirmed and suspected, I will be mentioning them consequently. So this specific one that I'd like to mention, and a few others that are related to it. So I was diagnosed with PCOS. So for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a polycystic ovary syndrome. So basically, I have my reproductive function, but it's largely compromised by the fact that my ovaries grow cysts on them that largely affect their function. So one of the prominent signs of PCOS is basically having irregular periods, constant mood swings, which is in normal cycle, it would be referred to as PMS or premenstrual syndrome, but you get those constant mood swings. Disrupted periods, that's probably the worst part of it, because you never know when your next period comes. Even if you're like 150% sure there's not a single chance you get pregnant or anything, it's still like sometimes 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. Sometimes people don't have periods for like a year. And I actually had a surgery back in 2019 to remove a fist-sized cyst from my ovary. It was benign, it was completely normal, it was actually one of the best types of cysts, but it's not about that. So my point here is that because of that, or rather, since it is not studied enough, I have PCOS, and I actually have a cyst in my brain as well. Most likely it's a prolactinoma, which is related to PCOS. Basically, it's in the pituitary gland, which controls hormone production. And in my case, it largely affects one of the birth hormones when a woman gets pregnant. One of the first hormones that start showing that is a prolactin level. And not being pregnant, the last I checked, I had my prolactin levels at the end of the first trimester, beginning of the second, and I'm not pregnant. I have never been pregnant. So yeah, it's all messed up. So sleep is related to that partially because sleep disrupts hormones as well. So not getting proper sleep actually can worsen your condition a lot. Not getting proper sleep, as in not sleeping at during the nighttime, it also affects the melatonin production, because melatonin is only produced when you're actually asleep, as far as I know. So when you're not asleep, when melatonin is supposed to be produced, which is the middle of the night, you're actually disrupting its production as well, and you get sleeping problems. So it's not happening, and it's not an overnight sort of change, but if it's continuous, it affects your sleep. So a lot of the times, even when you do have an option to actually go to bed and fall asleep early, you're unable to do that because your whole sleep cycle is messed up and you are just unable to fall asleep because melatonin is not produced at the right times. So it does not help you to stay asleep. Another two things that sleep largely affects you that I have been struggling with. One was confirmed, one wasn't, but it's still a concern for a lot of people. It's blood sugar levels and blood pressure. So I don't know the science behind this, but I do know for sure that not getting proper sleep, and specifically proper sleep at nighttime when the body's supposed to be resting because it's literally night out, it's messing up your blood pressure and blood sugar. So both would be elevated. It's okay if your blood pressure is slightly elevated in the morning as you wake up, but upon you starting to move around, it naturally drops down. So it's actually quite recommended for people who are suffering from blood pressure, even if it's not related to sleep, still go for a walk in the morning because it effectively helps to keep it down and keep it low, like not super low, but at least within the normal range in the long term. But with blood sugar, it's a bit more complicated. So it's also connected to your sleep and it's also disrupted because when you're asleep, when you're not moving much, when your brain is not working and processing, intaking and processing information as actively, you're also not eating. This is when your body gets a signal that it can rest and finish all of the job that it hasn't finished. Like some of the final digestion may still happen while you're asleep. Um, so yeah, just I don't want to go too scientific without much proof and evidence because I'm not a scientist. I'm not a medical specialist. I just know some of the stuff because I read on it. Just know that sleep can affect you way more than you think. And I have been struggling with increased blood pressure and increased, or at least elevated, blood sugar levels. Back in 2019, when I had my ovary surgery, I also left a job that was causing me so much stress over an extended period of time that basically my body was so wrecked with that stress that it started giving up on me. So I started getting tachycardia like crazy, like over 120 beats per minute in resting state. My chest was literally pounding. I had two hypertension crises, and back then I was like 25 years old. I did have a couple of bad habits. I used to smoke back then, and obviously, when you're stressed, you tend to smoke a lot, which does not improve things. And by that time, I was basically smoking for roughly 10 years. So, this is long enough for at least initial damage from smoking to finally showing up. And obviously, stress is largely messing with your health too, so it will be aggravating whatever underlying condition you might have. So yeah, I had to actually leave the job for medical reasons because I was so messed up that, like I said, my body started giving up on me. I started having chest pains, uh, endless, and I mean endless, and terrible headaches and migraines. Nothing could put it out. That was just all from stress. And because at the time I was still in Ukraine, obviously, but I was working for a company based in America, so we were working with American market. And the time difference between Ukraine and United States, even though United States literally has 6 time zones, uh, the Eastern Standard Time was still like what 7 hours away, 7 hours behind. So we started our workday in the afternoon, Ukrainian time, but it was early morning in American, at least East Coast. So because of that, my sleep was messed because I was coming home closer to midnight when I'm normally supposed to be asleep, and I'm actually one of those people who can't get home and just get dressed right away. My brain keeps processing the information all the time, so I do need an hour or two, sometimes three, to just unwind and let my brain cool down enough to actually try to even get some sleep. So, yes, I was going to bed at what some would call ungodly hours, basically closer to morning. I was waking up closer to the afternoon, so that wasn't really a problem in terms of not getting enough hours of sleep. The problem was uh, getting sleep at proper hours and making proper sleep arrangements. Back then, I was quite sure that it wasn't a problem for me, uh, because the job paid money, and we all need money. We all need to support ourselves somehow, especially if we're adults. So yeah, back then I didn't really think even about that, and I was like 25, and I basically left the job after I realized that one evening I went out to have a smoke, and it was closer towards the end of the workday finally, and I realized that I'm starting to lose balance and my head's spinning and I feel like I'm literally about to fall. And as far as I remember, I also went some sort of numb. So this is something that probably cardiologist would describe as a pre-stroke condition at 25 years old. Luckily, I didn't end up having a stroke, but it was so terrifying that it actually made me think. So I love the job, and I actually took quite some time to actually just recover. Obviously, after I left the job, I started making medical appointments to try and identify what's wrong with me. That's basically when I learned that I have a tumor in my pituitary gland because the neurologist sent me to get an MRI to see if there's maybe any physical problem that could be causing me those terrible migraines and headaches I was having. So the first improvements that I actually noticed that happened to me uh, happened only half a year later after this happened. So literally half a year later after I left the job. And I did make some adjustments. I basically managed to quit smoking. This time for good because I realized that I was still having tachycardia. I was still having elevated blood pressure, and I was told to actually monitor it to prevent anything serious from happening. And I realized that while I was still super anxious because stress caused me an anxiety, um, I was also having heart palpitations then, and I realized that every time I went for a smoke, it made it worse for me. Physically worse, I could feel like my heart thumping, and I didn't like the feeling. So I actually managed to quit smoking for good. Uh, yeah, but I still didn't see a problem with my sleep. Neurologists actually prescribed me some sleeping pills, but they did not help much. So they sort of made me a bit um, slumber, maybe, but they didn't really help me sleep much better or at all because I was prescribed them for, I would say, a month. And like the first few nights, they would be working and everything else was just literally having no effect on me. And I tried 2 different sleeping pills. The first ones that she prescribed me actually gave me a pretty bad headache, so we had to switch to a different one. And like I've said, they only worked for the first 2 days, and then it didn't happen. And she was pointing out to the fact that I do need to sleep at proper times. And again, I didn't pay much attention to it because I was not connecting sleep to be a considerable issue for my health back then. I thought it was just stress, but stress also wrecked up sleep, obviously. It was only until very recently, like as of maybe a month ago, that I actually learned that because you don't sleep at night, if you actually fall asleep past midnight, that's when you start disrupting your sleep, which ultimately affects in increasing your blood pressure and blood sugar levels. And I've been struggling with blood sugar because PCOS is quite closely connected to insulin resistance. So if you have insulin resistance, it might actually seriously aggravate PCOS. So I'm supposed to watch my sugar levels. The least I'm trying to do is just not to stress about it, because stress also increases blood sugar levels. To cut a long story short, uh, like I said, only recently I learned that sleep is actually very responsible for blood pressure and blood sugar. And yes, I am supposed to watch my sugar. I'm not supposed to drink sweet sugar drinks and everything else. And I'm supposed to be watching my diet. But because I am having trouble with maintaining schedules, sticking up to them, I thought that I'd actually do small steps first, just as part of that rewiring the brain strategy that I am implementing. And I would actually try to fix my sleep. Funnily enough, after I actually learned about how sleep affects my health, or just any person's health, that's when I stopped looking at going to bed early as a boring stuff, sort of a punishment, because before I was staying active during the night, because with the odd working times, I felt like night was literally the only time when I didn't have any chores, because you literally can't do anything around the house. You can't vacuum, you can't clean, you can't even really wash the dishes because it would be too loud with everyone else asleep in the house. So I used to do some crafting or do some gaming or listen to music, so it was literally the only me time that I had. And I felt like even when I had a chance to actually go to bed earlier, not only I wasn't able to fall asleep because my brain was always busy processing information and coming up with new ideas. Uh, I was also seeing it like boring because, oh look, I have so much craft to do. Why would I go to bed? It's boring. Besides, I still have time. I still have time. That's literally my nemesis right now. So, once I learned about the effect of sleep, I stopped looking at going to bed early and specifically falling asleep early, because it's not the same going to bed early and falling asleep early. That's 2 different things. I stopped seeing it as a punishment, and I actually managed for about a week and a half to fall asleep early enough. However, because of this very prolonged habit of sleeping at odd hours, uh, the first 3 or 4 nights were actually quite brutal, because even if your body was physically exhausted and it was easier for you to fall asleep, it doesn't mean that your sleep would be restful or that you wake up rested. I'm the one who tosses and turns a lot at night, so I often wake up when I'm turning over. And obviously, when you're trying to sleep at an unusual hours unusual for yourself. I mean, if you used to fall asleep at like 5 in the morning and then you go and fall asleep at 10 p.m., that's quite a difference. I was waking up a lot and the sleep was literally hell. I was waking up so tired. I was hating it all, but I kept doing that. And the coffee didn't help me much. But once my body sort of adjusted to that sleep change, After a few days, I actually started feeling better. It was easier for me to fall asleep at night. Uh, it was easier for me to wake up. I wasn't as tired, and I lasted longer throughout the day. I was willing to actually do more, despite being depressed. I actually felt like I could do more because I woke up somewhat rested and recovered, and I had a bit more energy, and therefore I was a bit more willing to do something around the house, which I'm struggling with. But after like a week and a half, I slipped back, so it's currently 1:02 p.m. here, and I haven't slept at night. But I'm also 100% guilty of staying on YouTube Shorts. I don't use TikTok, I don't use any social media, but I do watch YouTube Shorts the whole night. And there's literally the same sort of nemesis. You start, like, you go to bed early enough, and you say to yourself, oh, I'm gonna watch a couple of YouTube Shorts. A couple of YouTube Shorts turn literally into 10 hours scrolling. And when I say 10 hour, I'm not exaggerating. It's a 10 hour scrolling. So I literally scrolled from roughly like 2 or 3 a.m. till pretty much noon. I was scrolling this whole time, and it's a problem for me. So for that, I also thought that, well, YouTube can be educative, but when you do it like 10 hours straight, it starts to be a bit debilitating, actually. So I got myself an ebook, and I started reading that, and I found, especially during that week that I slept during proper times, I found it easier to substitute YouTube with just reading a book before bed, however many hours or pages it would take, just still. Yeah, so I'm trying also to cut down the YouTube habit with fixing my sleep and reading more books, because I actually haven't read a new book in I don't know how long actually. And I have generally not been reading a lot or at all for the last few years at least. Again, to cut long story short, I am trying to reinstate a proper sleep habit, and one of the ways to actually do that kickstart or like jumpstart is to actually, when it's a night like this, when I don't sleep at all and it's like noon and I still haven't fallen asleep, usually there is not much sense in going to sleep, because even if I fall asleep, I would still wake up at like 6, 7 p.m. and then the whole night gets wasted again because I slept through most of the day and then I woke up literally in the evening. So when it's like this, I try to actually skip sleep altogether until the next night. It's not healthy. I understand that it affects my brain in worse ways than I would have had sleep even during these wrong hours. That's fine, because I know why I'm doing this. One time, skipping sleep is actually in the long course better than trying to get any sleep at all, but at the wrong hours. Because if you're trying to reinstate a habit of having a healthy sleep, it's better to skip a sleep until the evening. I know I can last. I'm gonna go and make myself some breakfast. I'm gonna go and make myself some coffee so I can take it through the day. I have things I can do around the house. I will not be very willing because the whole day is messed up because I didn't have sleep. I don't have much energy. My judgment, my vision, my thinking is probably impaired, and that's why I'm not planning much for today. But I would say that as a part of this restart from scratch for myself, it's not even really reinstating, it's literally instating the habit from scratch as well, because I have slept at these wrong hours for so many years, literally since my first job in 2014. Back then I was working as a customer support representative at an online casino, and we were working 3 types of shifts. We initially started with 12-hour shifts 4 times a week, which obviously sometimes included the weekends, but that's fine because you work for 4 days and then you get 3 days off, and sometimes you can have all 3 days off. But then they decided to split it up into morning 7-hour morning and evening shifts and 10-hour night shifts. So I was still working at night, and I was still working mostly with American market, so it was still pretty messed up sleep. So if you're struggling with your sleep just as much as I do, try doing one thing. Today is literally March 10th. I would take the remaining 20 days or 21 days with just one main goal to reach throughout this month, because any habit takes time to stick. 1 week is not enough. 3 weeks to 2 months is probably a better idea. So I literally have 3 weeks to try and instate a proper sleep pattern. There would be mishaps. I would sleep off. The main point is that don't punish yourself for sleeping. It's okay. We are all humans. We're faulty. We can sleep up. That happens. The main point is not to beat yourself up for that, because you can try again as many times as you need until you get it right. You have the choice. You can try again. That's the most important thing. So I will be spending the rest of the March trying to instate a healthy sleep, and that will be the only health sort of thing I'll be keeping my focus on right now, without overburdening my brain trying to fix everything else that's wrong with my life. Everything is literally wrong. Most of it, I would say. But I will get to that eventually. So let's do this together. Sorry it's taking a bit long, but I have a lot going on in my brain, and like I've said, I will be slowly unfolding that and hoping that my mind will get a bit clearer. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.